All right. My name is Juan Valenzuela. I hope you all have a fantastic experience tonight. We are going to start right away with tonight's song. You know that music is a very powerful tool for teaching. And tonight, I want to share with you a very nice song. The name of this song is Over the Rainbow. I'm sure you've heard it before. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear the guitar? I want you to please type in the chat box if you can hear the guitar. Can you hear it? All right, good. Good. Are you ready to start then?
Someday I'll reach upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far below me, where trouble melts like lemon drops, high above the chimney top. That's where you'll find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. There's a land that I care not, once in a lullaby, somewhere over the rainbow. Skies are blue, clouds high over the rainbow, makes all your dreams come true.
All right, good. All right, tonight's our last webinar. It is the last session of the program. Yes, that song is great, Dalia, you're right. I want to thank you all for being here. I also want to thank Editorial Norma for making this event possible. Tonight we have two special guests, two international speakers with us, and I am sure it'll be a great experience. We are sharing teaching experiences here. Your presence here is important because it is empowering the way we deliver our teaching in our communities, in the different cities of our country. So thank you, Sima, thank you, Daniela, thank you, Editorial Norma, for making this event possible. We are going to have our usual warm-up. We are going to start with 5 general knowledge questions, and then we are going to go straight away with the first presentation of the night. There are 5 questions. I want you to turn on your microphones or type your answers in the chat bar in case you know what the answer is. All right, I'm giving you alternatives right now. The first question says, how many bones does an adult human have? Do you know the answer? You can turn on your microphone and give me the answer. If you know it, here are the options. 300, 206, 56. Does anybody know? All right.
I think 206.
Yes, that's right. Good. You're right. 206, that's the answer. So 1 point for the girls. Yeah, girls are always smarter. All right. Second question. What's the smallest continent? Here are the options. The 3 of them start with the letter A, Asia, Australia, America. What's the smallest continent? Who knows?
Australia.
Australia.
Australia. Point for the girls again. Yes. One more point for the girls. All right, good. Next question. Which country gifted the Statue of Liberty to the United States?
France.
You know, yes, this
France.
Statue of Liberty is in New York, yes, Eleazar, but it
Which
wasn't
country
built in
did
the
it?
US. It was a gift, it was a present that Americans received from French people, yes. So it was gifted by France. Yes, you're right. Right, good.
General con knowledge question. Who invented telephone?
Here's our
Alexander
fourth
Graham
question.
Alexander Graham Bell.
General
Yes,
knowledge.
the girls are very smart. Good. Yes.
Thank you.
And this is the last question of the night. What's the capital of
What is the capital of Australia?
Canberra.
Canberra.
Good, good, good. You know them all.
Okay.
Yes.
Canberra.
All right. Good, so good.
¿Quién?
Okay, good. All right. Right now we are going to start with the first presentation of the night. Okay. Once again, I want to thank Editorial Norma for contributing with the quality, with improving the quality of education. You know, Editorial Norma is contributing in many different ways because the education service, the educational service they offer has to do with all subjects, not only with English. They have made this event possible. Tonight we have 2 international speakers. First, we are going to hear Miss Seema Kumari. She's from India. She's going to share her expertise on English language teaching methods. I am sure this will be very positive for our teaching and will increase our teaching knowledge for delivering better quality teaching. Seema Kumari is a professional English teacher trainer. She has a degree from Hengwati Nadang Bauguna Garhwal University. I don't know if my pronunciation was right. For many years, she worked in different prestigious institutions as an English teacher and kinder teacher in Dehradun, India. After that, she moved to Peru, where she worked in the embassy as a cultural representative in foreign and diplomatic relations. She got a major in ELT from Ricardo Palma University and is currently working as a coach who prepares teachers in methodology. So with you, Ms. Seema Kumari. Seema, good evening. You are going to host the meeting right now. I'm going to share the host with you. You are the host right now. So the audience is yours. Thank you very much for being here with us tonight, Seema.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, I want to share my screen with you. I'm so sorry. My question is, could you see my screen? Yes? Okay, thank you. Good evening, dear partners. Well, I'm calling you partners because I'm also an English teacher. And my name is Seema Kumari. I'm an English trainer and ELT consultant. So let's start with the methods. English language teaching is a field that has gone through much of research and has been in constant change. During the past century, different scholars have attempted to design the most effective approaches for learning a language. Thanks to these efforts, we can name different methods and have dominated the teaching and learning of English at different times. These methods have given us opportunities to learn about the wide range of procedures and techniques that is taught nowadays. Even though we don't use the same approaches and methods from the past, we still use some techniques that have proved useful when teaching English. It is very important to consider that times change and that we have adapted some of these procedures and techniques to suit the new trends and technologies to use them effectively. As you can see here, we have some pictures, right? One picture, like above, you can see is old picture, is from the past, right? And another picture that you can see here, we have 1, 2, 3, 5 kids. It's like we can say from 80s, I think, from United States of America. The another one is from 20th century, and the last one is from nowadays. The purpose of this lesson is to learn about approaches and methods in English language teaching and learning. You will be provided with more options to choose in your teaching English. For example, teachers, I want to ask you, all of you, do you feel that you have wings? It's a little funny, no? Maybe you look to your right, look to your left. Feel. Maybe we are superheroes. We all teachers are superheroes. Yes, that is true. We all are superheroes, no? Approach. What is approach? An approach describes the nature of the subject matter to be taught. Okay. Method. What is method? A method is a procedure. Like you can see in the picture, no? All these are methods. And like a puzzle, we have to see it. Techniques. Now the question is, what are techniques? The techniques are particular trick. Techniques must be consist with a method and therefore in harmony with an approach as well. As you can see in the circle, the techniques are in the center. And after that, what comes? Methods. And in the corner, we have approach. Approach method. An approach method describes how the people acquire the knowledge of the language and the conditions that are necessary to learn. A method provides specific information about the following elements: objectives, activities to follow, the role of the teachers, the role of the students. A method includes procedures and techniques. Procedure. Procedure is a sequence of techniques is usually described in terms of first, second, next, and so on. So let's start with methods. The first method we have here is grammar translation method. The grammar translation method was originally known as the Persian method. This method dominated Europe from 1840s to 1940s. And name suggests the emphasis was on teaching the grammar and the focus was on translating form and into the target language. Terms of grammar translation method. As you can see here, grammar translation method follows many terms, like for example, classes are conducted in L1 language, instruction in L2 language, vocabularies, explanation of grammar are long. Okay, there is focus on form, texts are long, there is not too much emphasis on the meaning. And only this is the method that where we use drills. You have to remember that only this is the method where we use drills and exercise. Pronunciation is not given attention. Objectives. Now, what are the objectives of grammar translation method? It placed emphasis on the understanding of literary words. So in conclusion, we can conclude that students were not favored by this method and that instruction was totally teacher-centered and not meaningful. In conclusion, we can also say the teacher does not require specialized teaching skills to use this method. However, we can also ask ourselves, who has not recurred to translation at one time or another for the sake of students' understanding? Even I did that. The next method we have here, the direct method. This method was known by different names, some of which were reform method, natural method, psychological method, phonetic method, among others. Finally, thanks to the features of the method itself, that it was finally named direct method. So what are the characteristics of direct method? Translation is prohibited. It focused on the teaching of everyday vocabulary and sentences. There is much use of realia, pictures, demonstrations. Language must be grammatically correct. The lessons are built upon topics like sports, family. If you talk about the objectives and techniques, so focus on spoken everyday language. And there are some techniques in this method. For example, number one, reading aloud, question and answer drill, getting students to self-correction. In this method, the students are corrected by themselves. Number four, conversation practice. Number five, fill in the blanks exercise. Number six, dictation. Number seven, map drawing. And the last one is paragraph writing. Conclusion. It would not be possible to convey meanings or to avoid misunderstandings if translation is not allowed. However, if we adopt certain techniques, some of these methods could probably be applied to the modern teaching practices. The next one we have here, audiolingual method. In audiolingual method was based on behaviors. There are three elements we can see. First one, stimulus. The second one, response. And the third one, reinforcement. So what are the characteristics of ALM method? There are many, we can see some. Dialogues are used to present material, memorization, and mimicry are frequently used. Repetition drills are widely used. Very important. Pronunciation plays an important role. L1 is almost never used. So what are the objectives of this method, ALM? The main objective of ALM was to develop the fundamental skill of listening and speaking. Also, accurate pronunciation and grammar were considered main objectives. Okay, let's practice something. I want that you all please turn on your microphone and repeat after me. All of you, please turn off your microphone and repeat after me. I'm here to learn about the methods. Or you can just practice with me, no problem. I'm here to learn about the methods. And what about you? And what about you? Repeat after me once again. I'm here to learn about the methods. And what about you? The next one. So let's practice and learn. To understand this method, I'm going to share with you one video so you can watch and you can see what kind of drills we use in this method. Let's watch.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Would you like to have the cleanest house in town? Okay. House in town. Just say that much. The cleanest house in town. Okay. Now this group here. The cleanest house in town. The cleanest house in town. That's okay. The cleanest house in town. The cleanest house in town. Okay, now just the cleanest house in town. 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 Very good. Okay. The cleanest house in town. The cleanest house in town. Just right now, just this group. Okay. That's good. In a minute. The cleanest house in town. 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 Good. The cleanest house in town. Would you like to have the cleanest house in town? Would you like to have the cleanest house in town? Okay. Would you like to have the cleanest house in town? Okay, you. What's the cleanest house in town? Good. Okay. The woman said, good morning. Everybody, good morning.
sorry, there is some internet connection problem, but I'm going to put it for you.
The cleanest house in okay. House in town. Just say that much. The cleanest house in town. Okay. Now just here. The cleanest house in town. Good. Okay, you. Like the cleanest house in town. The cleanest house in town. Like the cleanest house in town. Good. Okay. The woman said, "Good morning, everybody. Good morning." The salesman said, "Good morning, ma'am. Would you like to have the cleanest house in town?" Okay, good. Now the woman says, "Yes, of course I would. Yeah. Yes, of course I would. Yeah." Sorry, this half of the class. Yes, of course I would. This half. Yes, of course I would. Yes, please. Yes, of course I would. Yes, of course I would. Yes, of course I would. Of course I would. Yes, that's it. With, yes, of course I would. Yes, of course I would. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, of course I would. Yes, of course I would. Yes, of course I would. Okay, everybody. Yes, of course I would. Salesman says, "Then, ma'am, you need the amazing Hoover vacuum cleaner." Vacuum cleaner. The amazing Hoover vacuum cleaner. Then, madam, you need the amazing Hoover vacuum cleaner. That's true. Then, madam, you need the amazing Hoover vacuum cleaner. Okay, you. Then, madam, you need the amazing Hoover vacuum cleaner. Good, very good, very good. You're talking about the amazing Hoover vacuum cleaner. That's complete. Very good. Everybody, then you need the amazing Hoover vacuum cleaner. We don't write down these dialogues as we're saying them because it's the end of the class. I'm going to give you a copy so you can read it. Right now, concentrate on memorizing it. Okay, and later you'll be able to see it in writing. So, at the beginning, the woman says, "Good morning." Good morning. The man says, "Good morning, madam." Good morning, madam. Okay. Good morning, madam. Would you like to have the house in town? Yes, of course I would. Then you need the listen, madam. You need the amazing Hoover vacuum cleaner. Yeah. No, I don't. What? Why not? What? What? Why not? What? Yeah. What? Why not? What? Okay, listen. What? What? Why not? What? With your head. Use your head. What? What? Why not? If you're happy, say like, why not? Everybody together. What? Why not? What? Okay. And the woman said, "Because my husband does the cooking and I
So funny, right? Like you saw in the video, the teacher used many things: dialogue memorization, backward drills, repetition drill, chain drill, transformation drill, no? Okay. Another method we have community language learning. What are the characteristics of community language learning? It's interaction between group members and the teacher of the class. The support provided by the group or the community lowered the feeling of anxiety. Teacher and students had the empathic relationship. Procedure. Teachers, what are the procedure of this method? The teachers greet students informally. The teacher set the class objective. The central activity was a conversation in the target language. Students form a circle, like you can see in the picture, in order to have visual contact with each other. Like in this picture, you can see a circle, no? This is the way the teacher teaches this method. The teacher translated the sentence in L2. The learner repeated the sentences and it was recorded using a tape recorder. Each student has a chance to say something and to record it. And what are the problems with this method? It depended on translation. So that means if the teacher failed to translate, then the understanding of the L2 would not be effective. Very important. The next method we have here, Suggestopedia. We have to remember in this method, the furnitures are very comfortable, soft lighting, background music, maybe it could be classical music. The students are allowed to use their mother tongue and the translation is considered useful. The classrooms should offer learning opportunities. There is an emphasis on speaking and vocabulary. Students choose new identities, names, or occupations, no? And there is always fun in the class, in every lesson. Sequence of Suggestopedia. The first is forever learning, positive suggestions, choose a new identity, role play, and first concert. Second concert, primary activation, and creative adaptation. Now the question is, what are the problems with Suggestopedia? In this method, focus too much on memorization and not on comprehending the language. Now we have the silent way and the natural approach. In silent way, the teacher used different tools to present the language. For example, questionnaire rods, color rods, Kotic charts, collapsible metal pointer, and colors. So these things are usually present sounds, words, and phrases. Now, what are the problems with a silent way? Like by the name, it says silent way. So all the time, like you know, the teacher is silent. So critics to this method explain that the teacher was too distant from the students and that silence was probably uncomfortable and did not create a cognitive atmosphere in the class. The next one, we have the natural approach. The natural approach places emphasizing on explore. The natural approach was concerned on the idea that learners should delay production, and that is great amount of explore should occur before students attempt to procedure language. We have three stages here: pre-production stage, early production stage, the last one is last stage. What are the objectives of this method? The key objective way to promote basic communication skills that are used in everyday situations, such as conversation, shopping, listening to the radio, and others. Important, the silent way and the natural approach show some techniques that are still used in parts of session nowadays. The next we have total physical response. The method was based on the assumption that if the teachers included physical movements, then students would respond better mentally. Problems. What are problems with this method? As with other methods, TRP has some limitations also. It was effective especially at beginner levels, but critics claim that in advanced levels, the method was not so effective. Next method, we have lexical approach. The main objective of lexical approach is to develop the ability to produce probable natural, and therefore successful language. In lexical approach, we have three kinds of chunks actually. Collocations, the first one, the second one, fixed expressions, and the last one is semi-fixed expressions. In this, we have soft cling and hard cling. The objectives are the content can be academic subjects, as in hard cling, or themes of general interest, usually soft cling. Now we have communicative language teaching. In this, authentic material, the first one, scrambled sentences, the second one, and the third one is language games, picture strip story, role play. We have one more method here, task-based learning. The main objective of task-based learning is to engage learners in tasks so that students who are involved in them acquire language they need when they actually need it. Tasks could be listening, matching, comparing, problem solving, creative tasks and projects also. And finally, we have electivism. There are not fixed characteristics in this approach. Why? Because teachers use different techniques in each lesson in order to reach to its aim. The method shows flexibility. Students are engaged due to the different techniques. Final remark. As explained above, there are factors to consider when designing our classes. Think about your teaching situation. Do the characteristics mentioned above fit your students? Why? Why not? Can you add any other features to the age groups? Thank you so much for your time, and I'm so sorry for the time also. Thank you so much. And if you have any query, any questions, so you have my outlook.com here, you have my Gmail. You can write anytime, and I'm going to answer you in personally. Please, you can write anytime. Thank you so much, dear teachers, for your time. Mr. Thank you so much, Mr. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, teachers. Thanks, regards.
All right, thanks, Ms. Kimari, for sharing with you your expertise and your valuable teaching experience with us. Right now, I want to introduce Ms. Daniela Vilcatoma. She's going to be in charge of the following presentation. Ms. Daniela, good evening and welcome to our event. Ms. Daniela Vilcatoma is a professional English teacher trainer. She has a degree from San Marcos University and she holds FCE, CAE, and CPE exams from the University of Cambridge. She worked in different prestigious institutions for many years and is currently working as a trainer who prepares students for international exams. So with you tonight, Ms. Daniela Vilcatoma. Ms. Daniela, good evening. How are you tonight? Your microphone is off. Can you hear me well? Yes? All right, but you can hear me, right? Okay, good. Okay, you're going to be the host now. All right? Okay, thank you. The audience is yours.
All right. Hello, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes, great. Okay, so thanks, Juan, for the nice introduction. And it's a pleasure for me to be here with all of you. And well, so let's get it started. I'm going to share my screen. Let me admit some. Okay, so well, as Juan Valenzuela has already mentioned, I worked as an English teacher in many prestigious institutions. Currently, I work as a trainer and I prepare students for international exams. That's why I'm familiar with all these kind of tests and materials that we can use and ways in which we can assess our learners. So welcome to this webinar that I've prepared and I hope that you can make the most of it. Okay, so let's get started. I have a question here for all of you. And the question is, how did you feel about tests when you were at the school? Did they make you feel confident with your learning? How did you feel? I would like you to share some of your ideas, opinions, perhaps by writing some comments in the chat box. So maybe here. In the chat. Yes, so are there any comments there? So I'm gonna stop, do it like. So perhaps the first words that come to our mind is, well, stressed or maybe worried about it, not sure what we were about to be asked. So the thing is that most of us have been through this situation, but we need to help our learners feel more confident when they are assessed. So let me share with you two options, right? So here, imagine that you are a student, an ESL student, and your teacher asks you to decide whether you want to be assessed by taking a test or by making a presentation, a project. Which would be the option that you would opt for? The test, the project? I think this has to do more with the type of learner that you are. Some students are visual learners, others are kinesthetic learners. we need to take into consideration Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. That's something that I always take into consideration when it comes to preparing some materials, some exams, some tests. So probably most of you would opt for the project. This is more enjoyable. You don't feel the pressure of memorizing things, grammatical structures, vocabulary, and different words. So in this way, I'm going to share with you what's the content. So what we will talk about today. First of all, there are three terms that are usually confused. Assessment, testing, and evaluation. Are they the same? Which includes the other? How related are they to each other? So we're going to check this throughout the webinar today. As well as that, I would like to share with you some purposes of assessment, the reasons. Of course, we know that it's all about knowing how much our students have learned, how much they have acquired, but there is more than that. As a third point that I would like to share with you is the differences between formal and informal assessment. So what examples can we have for them, right? So different ideas. As a fourth point, formative and summative. Well, we can have formal and informal, but also formative and summative assessment. What is it all about? What are the differences? What examples do we have? How can we put this into practice in our lessons as teachers? Because we need ideas, lots of ideas. And well, when it comes to making a new test, creating a new test, preparing new material, we need to take into account different criteria. So this is where it comes the basic assessment guidelines. So there are some words, some terms that I'm going to show you. Perhaps you are already familiar with it, but this will help us make things better. And then I'm going to talk about some types of assessment, perhaps some tests and some performance assessment that you will find useful for your lessons. So let's get started with the first question. Assessment, testing, and evaluation. Are they the same? That is a question that we always ask. The title of this webinar is assessment, but what are the differences between these other terms? For this, let me show you a diagram. As you can see here, all of them are integrated. They are a part of each other, so they are connected. So let's start by talking about testing. What is testing? Testing is the formal way in which we measure our learners' English and language performance, how much they have learned throughout the course or perhaps the term or the year. Some characteristics of testing is that it usually happens at the end of a unit or perhaps at the end of a term. If it's a course or this doesn't happen throughout the lesson, the course of instruction. All of this is at the end. The typical paper that we receive with some exercises, some multiple matching, gap filling, that is when we talked about tests. Another characteristic that is important to point out is the fact that testing provides students with a score or a grade. Here in Peru, we tend to give students a score of 20 or, I don't know, 16, 17, depending on their performance. On the other hand, we also give them a score of A or a grade of A, B, or C. So they have an idea whether they are doing this well or not. And of course, this measures specific knowledge. What do I mean by specific knowledge? Specific knowledge is about vocabulary, the lexis, collocations, phrasal verbs, all those things, but also grammar, grammatical structures, tenses, and in addition to that, functions, how we use a specific language in different situations. Not only that, but also overall proficiency in using the language. How effective am I when I say something in the target language? That is what tests are about. Let me show you some examples for tests. As you can see here, I would like you to share with me what type of tests or what type of exercises can you see in this case. For example, in the first one, what type of exercise is that? Can you see, do you notice? There we have some questions, right? So are there any comments? All right, so basically in this case, the name of this exercise is multiple choice. So this is a typical exercise that comes when it's about tests. We usually make our sentences and we provide students with different options. This can be from A to C or perhaps from A to D. What is very typical here, I know that you as teachers some of you are responsible for making your own tests. So, well, based on my experience, I've noticed that out of the 4 options, 2 have nothing to do with the question. So that's something that can help you. And there are 2 that might be confusing. So always provide learners with 4 options, I would say from A to D, in order for them to notice which ones are not related to the sentence, to the grammar, and which 2 may be helpful for them. So they will recall the grammar or the vocabulary that they have seen. Apart from that, in the case of multiple choice exercises, what is also evaluated is meaning. So for example, if you have an idea, a sentence, you may ask the student to choose the right word because they have seen that during the lesson. Well, so apart from that, we also have other types of exercises. For example, gut feeling. In gut feeling, simply students have to complete sentences or maybe a paragraph just with 1 word, right? So they need to make it fix. Perhaps because of the grammar, they notice which word is missing. Perhaps it may be a preposition or a relative pronoun or a conjunction, any word. Everything that has been seen during the lesson. That's very important. Another example of tests, of exercises that you can use in tests would be sentence completion. That's very typical in the International Cambridge exams. So in this case, especially in the listening, you have some sentences. Some of them are just the beginning, and then you need to complete the end of it, depending on the item that you as a teacher are evaluating, right? So here you have different possibilities for you to make your own tests. So based everything on your students' needs, on your students' performance. So we've already talked about testing, and I hope that this is clear. So what about assessment? As you can see in the diagram, assessment is more than testing. It includes testing. And this, as it says, identifies learning goals, learning objectives, and determines how well our students, our pupils, are meeting them. So this is the whole thing. So this is an ongoing process. We never stop assessing students, even if it's consciously done or unconsciously. So perhaps while a student is performing or saying something, we might be thinking the right way in which your student can say that sentence. So we tend to recall, for instance, if a student says, well, yesterday I did a decision, and you're thinking immediately, no, that's not right. So a way in which you can do this, you can say, so you made a decision using recalling. That is very helpful. Students don't feel bad. They feel encouraged, motivated, and they say, yes, the teacher is paying attention to what I am saying. So that's very important in this case, to be careful with students' own feelings. In addition to that, assessment helps to plan for future lessons. There might be some cases in which we notice that not only one student fails or makes a mistake, but we notice that this is just a kind of fossilization. So in that way, what we do is, okay, we take note of it and we prepare a future lesson so as to reinforce the language that has been misunderstood or not cleared enough. So let me show you some examples. Here, there are a couple of pictures, right? So I would like you to tell me, to write maybe in the chat, what can you see in the first one, in the first photo? How do you think the assessment is being done here in this case? There's a classroom. Any comments, some ideas in the chat maybe? You can write that here. So perhaps here, any ideas? Monitoring, yeah, good. Thanks, Claudia, yes. That's monitoring, the teacher is monitoring, and is she saying something to the student? Something about perhaps the student's work? So let me share here with you what it's. Appraisal of a student's performance. Appraisal of a student's performance is part of assessment. As I mentioned before, assessment is always ongoing during our lessons. How can I do this? Perhaps I approach my student and say, very good, well done, fantastic. Not only that, but also by providing them with suggestions. So, for example, you can say, don't you think it's a good idea to put this way? Or why don't you write in that way? You make suggestions so students improve in their performance. That is about assessment, appraisal, always positive comments or suggestions. How the second one, the second picture? What is the teacher doing? Can you share with me? What can you see, please? Maybe in the chat, you can write some things. What is the teacher doing there? Students are in their lesson, taking notes. Great. Thank you, Maria. The teacher here is taking notes, and that's something very useful. So here, let me write it. Taking notes for future lessons. This is very typical, and based on my experience, I've done this many times. When it comes to speaking activities, I monitor, but I don't make myself notice. So I just walk around the classroom and as if it was something natural. But in the process, I'm listening to what my students say, right? So perhaps I hear some mistakes and then I go back to my place and take notes of what I heard. But be careful in this part. It's important that you not only take note of the mistakes, but also good things. Perhaps you heard a sentence grammatically well constructed and you want to show it to the rest. Believe me, when you do that and when you show it to the students on the board, perhaps, you may say something like, okay, students, here I have some sentences that I heard from you. Can you help me to decide if these are correct or incorrect? So you work together, and if a student sees that his sentence is there and it was correct, he will feel proud. Nobody is exposed. Nobody says you did this, you wrote that, no names. Remember that exposing students is never the best way to do this. So that will help you in your future lessons. Taking notes for your plans, all right. So we have already seen testing, all the papers with multiple choice, gap filling, assessment, an ongoing process. But what about evaluation? Evaluation involves the gathering of information. So it's the whole thing. It's more than assessment, it's more than testing. It includes everything. So this is how we collect information to determine the success of a particular program or course. So it's not only evaluating the students' performance, but also the curriculum, our own methodology, whether the materials have been well implemented or not, or maybe the objectives. have we met the objectives or not really? In addition to that, this has also to do with classroom observations. So we may ask some colleagues to observe our lessons and to provide us with feedback. So we're evaluating the students' reactions towards the class, towards the teacher, but also the teacher's performance. Even if you want to have a meeting with a parent or a student, you may do so. You might have start asking questions, natural questions. So you, if it's in English, for instance, if you tell your students to do a project, you might have a conversation with him and start asking, oh, so what do you want to do your project about? Eliciting information about the project. The student doesn't notice that he's being assessed, but in the process, you are hearing, you're paying attention to what things he needs to improve. And that is, of course, unconsciously, because, well, as the time goes by, we tend to do that as teachers. That's natural. So let me show you a couple of pictures here. In the first one, what would that be? What can you see in the first photo? Can you share with me, please, the chat? Write some comments, please, in the chat. Here, where's the chat? So here we can see some materials, right? Some materials, some flashcards. We may evaluate the efficiency of these materials in the lesson. Were these flashcards useful for learning for my students or no? Or do I need to change it for future lessons? The same here, materials, right? And here, class observations. Somebody else can help us evaluate the students to see, as I mentioned before, their reactions or their reactions towards the lesson, right? How well they are performing in terms of speaking, in terms of writing, understanding, listening. That will be very helpful. Okay, so this is all about assessment, testing, and evaluation. Let's move on to the next part. Here we have number 2, purposes of assessment. Okay, so we know that assessment is important, but why? The big question is, why should I assess my students? Perhaps the first answer that comes to your mind is because I want to know how well he's doing. But there are other reasons. For example, we may assess our learners to make decisions about where to place them, if they should go in a beginner level or in an intermediate one, or perhaps in an advanced level. So that will help us provide support to these students according to their needs, right? Not thinking that they are just one thing. No, yes, they are individuals. So they have different needs and they have different abilities. In the same way, another reason would be to identify learners who need special support. Perhaps when we check our exams, we see that one student has problems with the present simple and another has problems with some vocabulary. Okay, so I can do it. I can prepare a lesson for in order to reinforce that, in order to make sure that what I'm teaching is clear, right? Not because I want to make the child feel bad, because I want to help him or her, right? It's all about support, providing support, scaffolding. I don't know if you have heard the term scaffolding. This can be done by not only by the teacher, but also by a classmate, somebody who knows more than this person, but of course in a supportive and comfortable environment, right? The zone of proximal development. I really suggest that you do some research on the zone of proximal development. That's very helpful in the classroom. So there are other reasons. For example, to monitor students' performance and achievement, to see how well they're doing, right? So how much they have achieved the goals. Also to measure and report pupils' progress. So as you know, here it's important to tell the parents how well they're doing. So we should give them a score or maybe some reports, so everybody knows how he is improving. Now, in addition to that, we can also monitor our own effectiveness as teachers. So the purposes of assessment is not only everything related to the student, but also to us. So if there is a problem, if there is a grammatical, I don't know, problems with some grammar or perhaps with some vocabulary, it's not because the student didn't understand, but perhaps we didn't make ourselves understood. We couldn't get through to our students. So in that way, we need to take actions. So if there is I don't know, some doubts on something, on a topic, we can plan a future lesson for this. As I mentioned before, assessment is for future plans, right? For the future as well. It's an ongoing process, yeah, but it's for the future. Well, what about formal and informal assessment? So in this case here, there are two different types of assessment. So for example, let me show you here. Formal assessment. What do we mean by formal assessment? In this case here, wait a second, okay. A formal assessment is used periodically. It's not that frequent. This can be at the end of something, right? At the end of the unit, at the end of a course, but this should be at the end of something and it's not that frequent as informal assessment. So it helps us know how much our pupils are learning, how much our students are improving in the language. So here I have some examples of formal assessment. What can we do to formally assess our learners? First of all, you can provide a typical test, as we have seen before, the multiple choice, or perhaps the gap filling or sentence completion. That will be helpful. But there are other ways. Let's try not to keep always in the same thing of the traditional types of assessment, but why don't we ask our learners to do a project? That will be enjoyable and beneficial as well. So in this case, we can ask them to collect their jobs, their works, their tests, their projects, maybe in a portfolios, right? In a portfolio of a student's work. They would like it. They will love it. So because at the end of the year, perhaps if it's at a school, they will see all the things that they have done. And perhaps we can provide them with a score based on everything, not only on every single work, but on everything, the whole thing. So they will love it and they will take pleasure in doing so. So I really suggest that you vary. You vary the way in which you assess your students. It's not always about having tests, exams. Children don't like it. Even teenagers don't like it. But do something different, because what is the important thing here? They need to show how much they know. And there are many ways. There are many ways. Board games, yeah, board games are useful as well, right, as I can see here. Yeah, great. So here, let's continue. But what about informal assessment? As I mentioned before, assessment is an ongoing process, right? So informal is not like a specific date. No, it's just something that usually happens. It's what we do much of the time when we are teaching, consciously or unconsciously. It depends. Sometimes when we praise our students' efforts, so for example, someone says a sentence and you say, yeah, very good. That's a valid point, right? So yeah, I totally agree. You react to what your learner says. They are not just like clients as we tend to believe them. No, they are individuals, they are people, they are humans, they feel. So they will feel proud if they hear some comments on their performance. Also, some brief comments on their performance, perhaps in a piece of writing, You can write very good, well done, or try it again, or you can do it this way, or why don't you? Suggestions. Suggestions will be essential for their learning process. They will make the most of it, because if you just tell them this is right or this is wrong, that's not enough. If something is wrong, how can I improve it? What can I do to make it better? So here, let me show you a couple of pictures, right? So here, I have in picture A, like I would say this is from primary level, right? So a very good sign. And in the second picture, what would you say? That's a piece of writing, right? A piece of writing. So there, I would like to know what impact might these types of comments have on students. For example, in the case of letter A, what would be the impact that this might have on students? Are there any comments, please? Can you share with me some of your comments, some of your opinions in the case of letter A? How will the student feel about it? Any comments in the chat, maybe? So here, where's the chat? In the chat. Yeah, they will feel emotion, motivation as well. We can write also words such as great or fantastic. They will feel excited, right, Zoila? Yeah, that's true. But what about the other one? In the case of letter B, how encouraging would that be? Would it be encouraging? In the case of letter B, some comments, so you have your piece of writing, everything that is highlighted, circled. So how do you think the student will feel if they, exactly, right? Thank you, Maria. Sometimes they feel bad because there are too many corrections, exactly. It's good to be motivating as well. Yeah, thank you, Luis, definitely. So here, you can be disappointed as well. Yes, so in this case, you may have a piece of writing, and sure, students are just starting learning a language, but they may have some problems when dealing with connections or constructing their own ideas. So in that case, if we find lots of mistakes, we cannot do that, right? I mean, the first thing that we need to do when we have a piece of writing is to read the general idea, to get what the student intended to transmit, to say. Because, you know, how much effort has this student put into this? Perhaps you just see this as a piece of writing, but they have put lots of effort. For them, this has been like the best thing that they have done, an achievement. And if you write things like that, that will be definitely demotivating. So something interesting that I've seen here, the use of codes, great, that would be fantastic, but focus just only on one type of mistake. If you see lots of them, grammar, vocabulary, spelling, etc., you just can focus on, check some spelling mistakes. So we can say, it says Roseville Perez says, we can say to students, let's check now. That's correct, or have mistakes. Okay, yes. So we can encourage our students to correct their own piece of writings, right? So perhaps we can extract some sentences, write them on the board, and ask, do you think this is correct, incorrect? Of course, without saying who wrote it, right? Without saying who wrote it, never exposing students. So in that way, they will notice how they can improve, how they can correct their own mistakes. So it says, Maria says, we have to tell them what kind of correction it is going to be considered. Exactly. That's true. So if you're evaluating grammar, or if you're evaluating spelling, or if you're evaluating vocabulary or content, right? It's not all about writing mistakes, because we usually act as robots, as teachers. It has happened to me too. So when I see a writing, okay, correct, incorrect, but no, that's not the way that we have to do it. We need to remember that our students also have feelings. Thanks for sharing your ideas. So definitely, the first one would have a better impact on a student, especially their feelings. So let's be careful with what we write, how we write it as well. So that was formal and informal. But what about formative and summative? What are the differences here? In the case of formative assessment, well, I was reading some books and I understood this. Formative assessment is assessment for learning, as it says, to form our students, to help them in the process of learning. So in this case, it occurs during the course of instruction, during all your lessons. And of course, it's useful to monitor students' learning, to provide them with help. And it helps us make decisions, right? Make decisions concerning teaching procedures. So perhaps we notice that some students are struggling with a particular grammatical structure or the target language, let's say present simple. So what we do is we evaluate them, but not for them to give a score, but for preparing future lessons that will reinforce this. So definitely this will be beneficial for the teacher, but most importantly for the students, right? So what activities can I do to help my learners, my pupils, improve in this area? In vocabulary, in grammar, in functions, in reading, what can I do? Always reflecting. As teachers, we need to reflect all the time, everything changes. Our students have different needs all the time. But here, what about summative? As its name implies, is a summary, summarizes everything. So this is the assessment of learning. On the contrary, the previous one was assessment for learning, to help learners improve in their process of acquiring a language. But in this case, it's the assessment of learning, to see, to check how much a student has learned, has acquired during the course. So as it says, it summarizes a student's learning at the end of something, at the end of a course, at the end of a cycle, at the end of an, I don't know, a unit, and it measures specific language skills, right? So perhaps reading, writing, listening, or speaking, it depends on what you're gonna evaluate. And of course, the overall proficiency in the language, how well they can make themselves understood, how well they can get through to somebody, to others. And of course, it helps us to evaluate the effectiveness of a program, of a curriculum. Perhaps the planning is not the ideal one, so we need to make some changes there. So that's how it helps. So let me show you some pictures here. And again, we have here the photo of the teacher taking notes. I would like you to tell me if you think that this is formative or summative assessment. What do you think? Any comments, please? Any comments in the chat? The first picture, is it formative or summative? Are there any ideas that you have? Formative. Why formative? Yeah, good, good. It's formative, yeah. But why formative? Just taking notes. Why? I would like to read some comments, right? It is observing the development of the student. Good, exactly. So this will help the teacher make future plan. Exactly, how well the student is going. Yeah, good. Because it's time, check it. Yeah, definitely, definitely, indeed. So this will help the teacher notice the strengths, but also the weaknesses of our students. In the case of the second picture, the teacher seems to be checking some homework. So what would that be? Formative or summative? What do you think? The other is just summative, but it is not an indicator. Sometimes that a student, okay, yeah, good. That's a valid point. Yeah, okay. Are there any other comments about the homework, checking homework? Summative. Okay. All right. In this case, in the case of checking homework, that will be formative. Why formative? That's a big question. Formative because you're just checking if they could achieve something, but of course, this doesn't determine, as somebody mentioned before, they exactly. It helps recognize where students are struggling. Yeah, thank you, Claudia Regina. Yeah, great. So it helps the teachers notice in which areas, in which features students are struggling. They have problems in terms of grammar, right? So, or vocabulary, depending on what we are teaching. So checking homework would be formative. That will help for the future. Thanks for sharing. And what about the last one? The last picture? Is that formative, summative? What do you think? Are there any comments? Formative, summative. Remember that summative is summarizes exactly, right? Thank you, Maria. Yes, summative. So in the case of a test, yeah, thank you, Luis. Yes, in the case of a test, that would be summative because it's at the end of something. And as I mentioned before, summative is the assessment of learning. That's the key word, of learning. But in the case of formative, that is the assessment for learning, right? For helping students learn. Right, good. Thanks for sharing. So formative, and summative. Fantastic. Now, let's move on to the next point, which is a basic guideline, right? A guidelines, an assessment guidelines. And I was reading some books, especially this one on testing, right? So Batchman and Palmer in 1996, they could identify different criteria. And this helped as a guidance for us to for language assessment, right? So especially in tests. So I'm going to show you some terms, some terminology, some ELT terminology, some words that will help you understand how you can make your test. What things you need to take into consideration when you make a test. So let's get started with the first one. Reliability. What do we mean by reliability? When a test or an exam is evaluated by, for example, let's say a piece of writing and a teacher corrects it and the student gets an A. If this exact piece of writing is corrected by another teacher and the student gets B, not A, this is not reliable. Reliable would be when the results are accurate and consistent. No matter which teacher corrects it, if the score is the same, this test is reliable. That's what we mean by reliability. Results should be accurate and consistent. That's it. So this is very important, right? So that's why there are some rubrics or some criteria that as teachers we need to follow. Okay, so what are you evaluating? What are you testing here? Content, vocabulary, functions, mechanics, if it's about writing. So everything is standardized. Now, there's another term that is very important as well. Validity. So in this case, this is kind of confusing, right? Tests which are only designed to test what they are supposed to test. So test is repeated again and again. Well, let me explain it to you. When an exam or a test is valid, it's because it is assessing what the students have been taught before. So for example, if a teacher, I don't know, starts teaching some collocations with the word do, and students know everything about it, and then in the exam, what they find is collocations with the word make. So that is not valid. Another example would be, for example, if a teacher teaches the future for plans, and in the exam, what comes is for predictions. That is not valid. So it's important to take that into consideration. Practicality. All the resources should be available for the task. So if it's I don't know, the summary of something, you need to provide the learners with the reading, with the material. That is when a text is practical. In the case of authenticity, the language should be relevant for the students. Perhaps You cannot ask, I don't know, a student, an adult student, to make a letter for their mother. I don't know. So this should be something relevant for them. Perhaps a review or an article according to their ages. And finally, washback. This is very important, right? The washback is the effect of testing on teaching and learning. So what do we mean by washback? Let me show you this. This is a situation. So Anna is a teacher, and she has taught her students the present simple to talk about free time activities, routines, habits, and frequency adverbs. However, she has just informed the learners that the end of term exam will be only about the right frequency of the right use of frequency adverbs. So what would be the washback effect here? This may be a little bit confusing. So let me explain it to you. Imagine that you're the student. You have been taught all this, but then you hear that your teacher tells you, okay, no, only in the exam, adverbs of frequency. Immediately, what you're thinking is, okay, so what should I study? Why should I check the other things? Why should I check the activities, routines? No, I'm just gonna focus on adverbs of frequency. So that would be a negative effect. That is what the washback effect has on learners. You teach something, you say something, and your students just focus on that. Preparing learners just for one specific thing wouldn't be helpful at all. You need to make them feel ready for everything. Now, as a way to finish, the last point, so we're running out of time, so let's start here. There are different types of assessment. Tests, for example, diagnosis tests. In this case, you can make your students take these ones in order to check which parts they are struggling with, as we have discussed before. Perhaps some placement tests to put them in beginner, intermediate, upper intermediate, advanced. Also achievement tests to check how much they have learned. So all the, I don't know, on a specific or particular unit, have they learned something? Have they achieved? Have they met the objectives? Proficiency test. So this provides the big picture, the whole picture of a student's language ability. How capable is a student of communicating in the target language, in this case, English? On the other hand, we also have performance assessment. So I'm gonna here show you some ideas that you can put into practice in your lessons. So for example, observations. Let's say, when you're telling the student, your students a story, you're listening, you're looking at them to check if they are paying attention or not. So that is the incidental observation. You are checking who is listening, who understands what you are saying. As well as that, conference and oral interviews. This will be very helpful. I've done this many times. When I set homework, then I try to talk to my students, but individually, and I ask questions. Okay, so Pedrito, how are you planning to do this? Questions about a topic, but they are speaking in English, and I'm evaluating them, but they don't even notice. And that's really, really good, because you know which aspects you need to reinforce, to work on. Then it can be a story or text retelling. If you tell a story to your students, your pupils, and even if they say that story in Spanish, if they tell that story in Spanish to their friends or to somebody else, in that way, you could have evaluated listening, because they heard this in English, no matter if they are explaining this in Spanish, but they heard it in English and they understood. His listening skills are being developed. That is very important to take into account. And of course, writing samples. For instance, reviews or articles, or perhaps letters, providing them with a structure to follow, some prompts. And of course, as we have discussed before, positive comments, suggestions. If there are some things that they need to work on, suggestions. Never say that something is wrong, totally wrong. No, that will be demotivating. always try to think as if you are the student. And here, well, projects, the typical, right? Posters, drawings, charts, so they can make fun of it, and portfolios. All the projects, all the drawings can be included there, and that will be helpful. And of course, other performances. Why don't we ask our learners to show what they have learned through movement? I don't know, role plays, oral reports, demonstrations. Perhaps if they know how to do something, they can teach us. They can teach us just by saying it in English. The idea is that they are provided with lots of opportunities to show how much they have learned. And of course, the last one would be self or peer assessment. Can-do statements will be useful. As I'm showing here in this photo, I can understand everyday signs and public notices. Is it good? Is it not? I could, I couldn't. So they just stick. They just stick and they feel proud, right? They feel proud, they take pride in this, and they will show it to their parents, to their teachers. It's always important that we help students notice that they are improving, that they are making progress, so they will feel proud of it. It's not only going, teaching, assessing, correct, incorrect, and that's it. No, it's more than that. So I would like you to keep with that message, right? So always help, provide support to your learners. So my question for you, as a way of reflection, which of the ideas presented would you like to try with your students? Something new, something that wouldn't be the same as well. So please, I would really appreciate if you would like to share in your comments which of the ideas would you like to try with your students. Well, that would be all for today. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this invitation. It's been a pleasure for me to tell you all this information, to share with you all of this, and I hope that you can make the most of it, right? So thank you so much. So let me stop share.
Thank you, Ms. Vilcatoma. Thank you for sharing these teaching experiences with us. Thank you very much on behalf of all the participants. All right.